for this. Just
Yes,
for
I
this,
think so.
yeah.
Yes, yes.
Um, um, I'm not sure whether have you heard of Wim Hof?
Yes, he's a wonderful man. He's rung me up on a couple of occasions and asked me questions, and we were going to do a workshop together, but it didn't eventuate in the end.
Oh
And
wow.
I love what he's doing, and the principle is in theory very good. And I practice a very similar technique because, as you know, his technique really is based on an Indian yoga technique, which is very similar to Bhastrika, or in a way it's like Shakti Chalani Pranayama or something like this, where very loosely what he's getting people to do, for people who are not familiar with it, he's getting people to hyperventilate first and breathe more than normal. And then he gets them to hypoventilate next and not breathe at all for a significant period of time. And I also practice the original technique, not the one that he does, but something more akin to Indian yoga. He's basically taken the philosophy of Indian yoga out of it and just called it a technique, which is fine. For some people, it works better. But the problem is, as I see it, is he's teaching it to 500 people at once sometimes. And of course, he's a very capable man. If he's teaching it to one person, he will make sure they do it properly. But I believe something which is as complex and potentially as dangerous as breathing can be when it's done this way should be taught to much smaller groups and make sure they prepare properly. Because what I've often heard of when people are doing this technique in a large group, or maybe learning it from a video or learning it from friends, is that they don't realize the importance of the breath retention after the hyperventilation. And for example, if I do the technique, I might hyperventilate for a few minutes, and do deep, full breath in, deep, full breath out, until a point where you can feel pins and needles come to your fingers. And this is a state of tetanus. Incidentally, for anyone who doesn't know, and even Wim Hof says this, you must never do this while you're standing up or while you're driving or
No, no.
underwater, because you can faint. And of course, some people erroneously took his technique, and people have died with Wim Hof's technique, not necessarily through Wim Hof's technique, but because they didn't do it properly and they didn't listen to what he said. But is it safe to give a dangerous technique to hands of lay people? That I'll question. Because in the techniques as they're taught in the Indian yoga texts, often what it will say is every sutra that I read begins with the word atta, which I understood to mean and then, and now we'll begin this next sutra. And then every sutra, most sutras will finish with, and now keep this a secret. And then the next sutra will start and it says, atta, now that you have learned the stuff I've told you, now I'm going to tell you the next secret. And so
Mm,
many of the techniques that we're using in something like Wim Hof would only be taught to certain aspirants once they've learned certain other techniques. So I will not teach something like a Wim Hof technique to my students until I'm convinced that they can breathe naturally under stress. I'm also needing to be convinced that they understand the physiology of breathing. I also want to know that they can hold their breath for a significant period of time already, and that they react well to stress. But what I've seen is, and so what I do is, if I'm doing the hyperventilation myself first and I breathe fast for a few minutes, when I hold my breath, I'm going to hold my breath for a minimum of 5 or 6 minutes. And if I
wow.
don't, say, for example, if I only hold my breath for 4 minutes, it's like I wasted my time. It's not going to have a good effect. The technique will be, okay, if I hold my breath for less than 3 minutes, it almost feels like it's had a negative effect. It's also made me a little bit overstimulated. Maybe you get some reasonable physical effects, like, you've exercised your tummy muscles. When I do the technique and I say breathe, hyperventilate for 4 or 5 minutes, and then hold my breath for 6 minutes. And I did this once with a university controlled study when my mouth was with a gas mask over it and I had wires attached to a computer. The computer said that after doing the technique, and it could read how much air is coming in and out through the gas mask, it said that I did hold my breath for 6.5 minutes. But right after holding my breath, I, you know, I actually felt I could have held my breath longer, but I was afraid I might faint, because you can faint. So I let my breath out and my air goes out and in very easily. I didn't pant. I went back to normal breathing and I sat there feeling remarkably peaceful. I felt super calm. at ease. I felt energized. I felt warm. And I thought to myself for a moment, I have never felt this good in my life. And a few seconds passed and I thought, wow, I feel amazing. I feel calm, clear, focused, peaceful, energized. And I went, wow, I've never felt this good in my life. And actually, a few seconds later, I thought this again, just this one quick thought, wow, I feel amazing. Then I thought I better open my eyes. I didn't need to, but I thought because the scientist and the professor were there waiting for my conversation, because it had been quite a long experiment. And the scientist said, I don't understand what's just happened then. And I said, why? What just happened? He said, you told us you were going to hold your breath. And I said, I did. He said, no, you held your breath twice. And I said, what do you mean? He said, he showed me the graph, and the graph went up, down fast for 5 minutes, where I was hyperventilating, deep, full breath in, deep, long, full breath out. Then it showed me make a big breath in, and the line on the computer went to a flat line, and it showed that for 6.5 minutes, I didn't breathe at all. Then it showed the graph go down and then up a little bit, down a little bit, and then it went flat line again. And according to the computer, measuring the air coming in and out of my nose, it said I did not breathe for more than 8 minutes after this point. And at that time, I was just sitting there going, I feel great. I've never felt this great in my life. I feel peaceful, calm, energized, focused. And I thought just a couple of seconds had passed. But in fact, I think I was in the closest state to samadhi I've ever got. A feeling of total oneness with everything around me, in the total, so present a moment, I didn't even feel time pass. And only a couple of moments, I thought, wow, I feel amazing. And I felt great for many days afterwards. But that was probably the most I've pushed what effectively is like a Wim Hof technique, but really is an ancient yogic technique. But most of the people I talk to who do his technique do not hold their breath anywhere near that long. I'm sure he does. I'm sure he's a very, very capable practitioner. It's not a problem with him or his technique. It's the way it's being received by the world and the way that people will tend to do things a little bit too quick without really the learning that's